then that can lead our anger towards self, lead us towards a place where there's anger towards self. And that can be accompanied by some guilt and maybe even a little shame, depending on what the circumstances and the situation is. Perhaps the area that makes us the most angry in ourselves is when we violate our own strongly held values. Anger at ourselves over our own moral or ethical failure is often accompanied by feelings of guilt. We'll wallow in our guilt and turn our anger inward. And listen, whatever the source of our anger, we have to learn how to process it constructively. There are often two ways that anger comes out: explosions or implosions. And these are two unhealthy ways that we typically respond. When there's an explosion, we can find ourselves orally berating ourselves. This is done oftentimes publicly or privately. There can be physical acts of violence against self, everything from cutting and pulling hair out to breaking things and even suicide attempts. When anger goes in the form of an implosion, we'll find ourselves attacking ourselves mentally and silently. We'll say things to ourselves like, my life is useless. I don't deserve to be happy. I don't deserve forgiveness. This internal self-condemnation can have detrimental effects upon our body and actually bring about physical problems, even with our digestive system and our neurological systems. So we've got to be aware of how anger is impacting our very being. But here's the good news, Santita. The good news is that we can deal with our anger constructively. Yes, there are positive approaches to processing anger, even anger towards ourselves. So let me give us 5 quick good ways that you can be angry at yourself. Because here's the reality. We're human. We're frail. We're fragile. We're going to mess up. We're going to do some stuff that leads us to be angry at ourselves. But we got to process it and move through it in a productive way. So number one, when you find yourself at this stage, this state, this place in life, I want you to, number one, admit your anger. You can talk to yourself. You do it anyhow. Do it now. Talk to yourself. Talk to a trusted friend. Find a pastor. Find a therapist. Talk to them about what's going on in your life, the thing that has triggered you to the place of anger with yourself. It's okay to say it like this: I'm really feeling anger towards myself right now. You can write it down. You can say it out loud. You can say it internally. But when you find yourself angry with yourself, I want you to first admit that you're angry with yourself. Admit the additional thoughts and feelings that come along with that anger as well. Second thing I want you to do is to examine your anger. Anger towards yourself can be one of two things. It can be definitive or it can be distorted. I'll define. If it's definitive, you're saying that my anger grows out of an actual wrong that I've committed. When it's distorted, you're saying that my anger has arisen from a perceived wrong rather than a real wrong. And both of these have to be processed, but it's helpful on the front end to know which one you're dealing with so that you can know how to appropriately process it. Number 3, I want you to confess the wrongdoing to God and accept God's forgiveness. Listen, if we're willing to confess our sins, God is willing to forgive them. Our part is simply to admit that we need God's forgiveness. And true repentance is always accompanied by a desire to admit wrong and to take restitution to those against whom we have sinned. Number 4, choose to forgive yourself. Forgiving someone else means that you choose not to hold the sin against them. You may move forward and accept them back into your life and continue building relationship with them. Well, guess what? The same applies to forgiving yourself. Same process that we take other people through is the same process we've got to take ourselves through. Because at its root, self-forgiveness is a choice. No positive purpose is ever served by berating yourself explosively or implosively. Forgiveness releases you from the bondage of your past failure and gives you the freedom to make the most of your future. Fifth and finally, you've got to focus on positive actions. Sometimes people make the mistake of trying to never think of their failure. Listen, that is a mistake. Here's why it's a mistake. Because we can learn so much from our failures. Moving forward, these two questions can help you. What caused me to fail in the past? And what changes do I need to make to prevent this from happening in the future? These answers, I promise you, they can lead to constructive growth. I want you to take the positive steps, these 5 positive steps to making your future brighter by moving to a place where you address your anger from the inside out.
Amen to that. We don't forgive ourselves. And then we make other people's lives miserable. We don't.
Yeah.
There's so much. I want you to come on. Maybe we can do this Friday. I don't know. But I think we need to do a segment on that, on self-forgiveness. Because so much of how we treat other people comes down to how we feel about ourselves.
That's right.
I was talking to someone who's close to me.
Self-worth.
Yeah. I was talking to someone and I had to absent myself of their company. I had to leave them. It just happened a few days ago. I said, you are unkind to me. And I've seen you be unkind to others. I'm not going to do this today. As a matter of fact, I'm not going to do it anymore. Just so that you know, I'm going to have one of these landmark years next year. And whatever time I've got left, there's a certain way that I want to do this. I want to live it like I've learned, because in the spirit world, there is no social promotion. You don't advance unless you learn the lesson. You can play that game down here.
That's right.
But not in heaven.
Yes, ma'am.
And so, you know what I'm saying? And so I said, no, we're not going to do this. And this person became very angry with me. Well, I'll just take you right back. No, you're not going to do that. I'm going to get out here. I got out in the middle of the street. Got to the sidewalk, took an Uber, and that was the end of that. Because that's the end of that for me. Because I have care. I had a talk just very quickly with my surgeon yesterday. It'll be 18 years since I had weight loss surgery. And I have lost half of my body weight. Half of it. More than half. And I said, I had to give myself credit for that. First gave honor and glory to God and gave myself credit. And I said, I'm not who I was then. I'm not going to carry that.
Yeah.
Not going to carry that. But I'm not going to absorb all your stuff. We got to talk about that, Stephen, because so much of what we see out here, with these mass shootings, I'm mad.
Correct.
I'm angry.
Correct.
So give me some time on Friday, please.
Happy to.
Because on a personal level, on an institutional level, this is what we're doing. And we have got to stop this. It's got to stop. It's got to stop. And something else has to start.
To a place of healing.
Yes. So today we can find you at what time on Facebook?
3 p.m. Central Standard Time. Stephen with the PH. Stephen Thurston.
Indeed, every Thursday. Every Tuesday, right?
Every Tuesday.
Every Tuesday. Even if you're not there, just go there and check him out. Go be active on his Facebook page, because past talks you can get a hold of. Because actually, I have been to lunch with you when you've done one of your talks. And when you broke away, get out of here. When you've broken away. Oh, wait a minute, give me a minute. I'm used to you preachers. Just give me a minute. I'm going to do this. I'm like, okay, Pastor Thurston. Let me go on and order another course. Love you so much, Pastor Thurston.
Love you too.
Teaching pastor of the Salem Baptist Church, of course. Stephen with a PH. Thurston, you want to catch him on Facebook today as he talks about these mirror moments. We've got to look at ourselves, heal ourselves. And you deserve a great life. And you don't deserve to limp along emotionally or spiritually. You don't deserve that. You deserve something else.
That's right. Something
better. And go on and get that teaching. We got Dr. Shanina Knighton. We're so excited about this new position she has, where she is the executive director of It's the Association for Professionals in Infection Control and Prevention. They have an IPC Research, Practice, and Innovation Center. And we're so excited that she is there because now we're going to hear about infection prevention in the midst of this pandemic and in the midst of our lives. You know, our kids are going back to school, Dr. Knighton. Hello to you. Let me get that out the way. Our kids are going back to school. What do you want? Do you think are infection preventionists involved in conversations with boards of education, with teachers about infection prevention, about what a classroom should look like, what a school should look like, what we can do to protect our children?
Good morning. So yes, we are in some of those locations. However, it has not been formalized in terms of it being equitable, accessible, and affordable to all school entities. So that's another thing. And so, of course, if you can imagine a lot of, let's say, school districts that do realize that they need the resources, they do have individuals come in and will provide best practices as well as information on how they should handle things. But it's not universal, meaning that it's not the expectation that you will have someone with infection prevention and control expertise that is assisting with ensuring that individuals do not get sick. I just want to emphasize how important that is, because one of the big issues, like even now, is not just us thinking about infection prevention and control because of monkeypox or because of COVID alone, because of the flu alone, but it's understanding what does infection prevention and control look like with all of those conditions, in addition to the common cold, in addition to lice, in addition to hand, foot, mouth disease, which are some of the other common ones that you will find. Pink eye, right? That you will find inside
pink
of food.
eye. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, and so these are common things, but and these are conditions where, as a parent, you get that call and say, "Well, your kid is out in pink and it's got drainage in it. Can you come pick them up?" Right? And so we don't realize in America the ripple effect that has. That when a kid gets sick at school, the parent has to take off work, and then the cycle continues. The kid misses schoolwork, so then there's some makeup there. So it's a constant cycle, and this is why I always emphasize that prevention is better than treatment. So as students, and we can talk about this another day, because I think right now, today, it's just raising the importance of why we should be in these spaces. That is why when you think about, let's say, coworkers, you have coworker Y, the teacher is out today, and then you have another one that's out in another 2 or 3 days, then another one that's out in another 5 days. How many times have you heard an employer say, "Oh yeah, everybody caught that bug, so it's been a lot of call-offs lately"? That's all they say. They don't think about how can we prevent doing a call-off by making sure that people are safe. How do we start to notice that there is a pattern of 2 and 3 people being off? So maybe we need to shut the office down or consider going to remote learning, right? Until we can ensure that this is not an outbreak. So unfortunately, our issues have been quite reactive. And when they are reactive, that's impacting these children, because if they don't have any educators there to teach them, they end up with substitutes and then are not prepared for their standardized testing. And so we have to think about these things more holistically. And as we talk, through the rest of the week, Santita, we can talk about, what should children be doing? What should parents be doing? What should, I was going to say, teachers, parents, and children are the main ones. So what does that look like in terms of making sure that they can have a successful and safe school year? And so it'll just be thinking about each of those entities separately, and then we can talk about how they work together.
Well, because I want, please write that down, because I want you to tell me why parents are the main ones. We need to talk about that, because parents are the main ones who don't know. We don't know. I mean, we think we're protecting our children. We think we're protecting ourselves, but we don't even know how to wear masks properly, right? I'm reminded just because I'm a post-operative biliopancreatic bypass patient. you take these tests once a year so that you can find out where you are, Dr. Knighton, and so that you can find out where you need to go. And then I have follow-ups in 3 months, and on and on and on. That's why health insurance, and not just health insurance, but health assurance. I'm sorry, I love my health insurance company, but I'm still paying too much money. And I think, we need to have a system where people can just go in and get well, period. Yeah, you shouldn't have to pay for health care. We're already paying for it, but we're paying administrative costs. This is ridiculous. And the wrong people, or should I say the people who we really needed to have involved in this conversation about the pandemic, were not there. Infection prevention, everybody. Hey, Dr. Nina, HEYDRNINA. Go there and follow her on social media. I love you, Dr. Shanina Knighton. Let's talk about President Trump, everybody. Call me at 773-763. WCPT. Back in just a minute. Okay, great.
Putin stopped these attacks immediately.
The ban on Russian oil imports.
And it will come from Russia. Yep.
News that happens next will happen on WCPT 820.
The most effective health
and you should call
tomorrow's leading health
Chaparral now.
Okay. More than meeting patient
I'm adding this other guy.
At NRC Health, we help you connect with your patients in a deeper way with important insights into what really matters. It's an approach that's transforming the healthcare experience, creating better outcomes for patients and entire healthcare systems. It's time to access the power of that.
Attorney Hoffler's on.
Okay, I'm going to send you 2 more numbers because I sent you Mr. McKee's number. And of course, you have to get
symptoms like jaw pain, nausea,
Mr.
fatigue, dizziness, and backache are often different.
Mr. McKee up, and I'm sending you that number again just in case. We'll have those 4. Attorney Hoffler.
Good morning, Santita. How are you?
I'm doing well. We got Robert Patillo. I'm sorry that I was so rushed this morning, but the story kind of caught me by surprise.
No worries.
Okay, but
Brandon Johnson's up.
Thank you. Not that, and please get Mrs. Wells up. Thank you. We'll go right there and then we'll pivot. Commissioner Johnson.
On the Aiden's Express.
Hey, good morning, Santita.
Hey, that segment has not been canceled. It's just been, we're going to reschedule it for tomorrow or the next day, okay?
We'll be ready. Thank you.
No question. It's just this story is so big, I can't go past it.
Of course.
Anniversary of, who is it? Of the Nixon resignation, actually. These people do, Dr. King was killed on the anniversary of his, he was killed he was killed 1 year to the day, to the minute that he announced his opposition to the Vietnam War. You think that was a coincidence?
No.
Okay.
No coincidences.
None.
Chicago weather update. Mostly sunny skies.
I'm sorry, who do we have now?
70s.
Dwight McKee.
Oh, okay. And please get Mrs. Wells up here. Okay. Thank you.
By Wednesday, sunshine high 5 degrees.
Hey, good morning.
Thursday, mostly sunny.
Good morning. Good morning.
Friday, plenty of blue skies.
Okay,
and
just give me one moment, everybody.
On Saturday, partial sunshine develops 582. From the Weatherology Weather Center, I'm meteorologist Jennifer Vuchitsky.
Okay, and Dwight, you're on with Attorney Hoffler and Commissioner Brandon Johnson.
Individuals and businesses.
Good morning, Dwight.
And we're going to have Robert Patillo shortly.
The IRS Deputy Commissioner has just announced taxpayer relief.
Okay, so it'll be great.
United Tax Fix will help you settle your
That CK might be dealing with some of this. We're going to talk about Brunswick, of course, at
Attorney
7.
Patill's up, and I'm going to call Chaparral right now.
Okay, thank you so much.
For a free consultation call.
Yeah, no, I am. This is one of the topics of my show a little bit later today.
Okay, well, please say
In
that.
addition to some other stuff.
WCPT
Okay.
AM is proud to announce that we've been recognized as an
I don't want you to.
business enterprise through
You
the
shouldn't
National
have, because,
Chamber
Robert
of
is
Commerce
getting,
and our local
more of this
LGBT Chamber of
audience.
Commerce of Illinois.
To be certified as
And
an
you should be
LGBT
grabbing this
is
audience too
no
so they
easy
can listen
feat.
to your
It's a
show.
serious declaration of not only
Okay.
proud ownership, but also our commitment to a diverse, equitable, and
Honey, we got to
inclusive
cross-pollinate.
business community.
We are the first and only
Chaparral's up.
Okay, thank you.
LGBT certification.
And Chaparral became my producer this morning. Because she called all y'all.
30 seconds.
Station promoting DEI, environmental stewardship.
She
and
called
democratic
everybody today. I said, girl, I can't do it all. And you cannot. So thank you all for being with us today.
Committed to our mission, as are our passionate and loyal listeners. We proudly celebrate LGBTQIA initiatives 52 weeks a year, not just in June. Celebrate with us.
Oh, hey, I'm doing okay. You know, I'm feeling okay. Doing pretty well in this blistering heat here in Georgia. Woo.
Stand by.
Change the world, change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
And hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. Let's talk about President Trump. Something unprecedented happened yesterday. Now, mind you, August 8th, 1974, for those of us who remember, I know I was a child, but I still remember when Richard Nixon resigned from the office of the presidency. It was a dark day, a very sad day in America. I remember it so clearly. Even though he was not, he and my family, my parents were at political odds. My father might have even been on his enemies list, maybe. I think he was. Still made me very sad to see him brought so low because, the president, whether we like them or not, whether we embrace their politics or not, whether we voted for them or not, the office is bigger than they are. That's why I've always been of the belief that once a president gets into office, they need to leave their party and they need to be someone who actually doesn't rule for their party, but someone who governs for all of us. Something to think about, everybody. We got to take this partisanship out of our politics. We're not served well by it because people are into their party and they're not into principle, and it's not helping any of us. So let's talk about this today, everybody. And before we do, you know what? Chaparral CK, I know CK and Dwight McKee and attorney Robert Patillo and Commissioner Brandon Johnson. Now, Brandon, you could get some of this food here. She brought me some, and I just finished them last night. Yes, I did. And I did save the gravy because I'm going to put it with the rice. Some oxtails. Oh, CK. I know you are not a meat eater, girl, but I'm sorry about that. Because I was Miss Carnivore last night.
I'm sorry about that, too.
Girl, it was...
I'm sorry. I still crave, though.
I know you do.
I still crave.
I know you do, but you always take me to such healthy restaurants, and I love it. That having been said, celebrations by us, they are in fact, you're in business and you're doing well. And indeed, one of our listeners came and got some food from you, Chaparral, right? Or you delivered some food to him.
He sure did. He ordered a great meal for his family reunion, Mark Stovall, and he really, really enjoyed it. And so we made him oxtails. We made him, what else do we make him? Mac and cheese, greens. We made him candy yams. We made him barbecue ribs as well as beef ribs. So he had a whole smorgasbord.
Oh my gosh! Well, I finished my greens already, so all the food is gone. Hint, hint.
CK, when you come back, I promise you. I promise. I'm gonna be here when you come. And then I'll make you some Cajun salmon. And I was just thinking about you the other day, CK. I thought I'll make you some Cajun salmon and some Cajun pasta, and so that way you're good. And then I'll make the gravy and stuff for the fellas.
Well, and for me.
Well, thank you.
And for me. And how can
I will bring your sweets. I will bring your sweets, CK, because I know you still say you eat sweets.
Right. And I eat every vegetable on your menu, every dessert that you have too. Just FYI.
I got it.
Every vegetable.
Celebrations by us is still in business. We are on vacation this week, but we are back taking orders. So if you need something after the 15th, don't hesitate to give us a call at 708-526-4546. 708-526-4546. We're still doing your balloon arches as well as your suite tables and your full wedding decor as well as party decor. So don't hesitate to give us a call at 708-526-4546. We look forward to serving you. Thank you so much, Santita.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Everybody, let's get right to it. What happened yesterday on the anniversary of the resignation of President Richard Nixon? Well, something unprecedented happened. President Trump said that that his home was under siege, raided, and occupied by the FBI. Indeed, they broke into his safe. Even now, he was in New York, so he missed all of this. I wonder what it would have looked like had he been home. So, we were going to be talking about education today, and I promise you that segment has not been canceled. It's going to be rescheduled because of the nature of this story. We felt that we really needed to pivot to this story today. And of course, John Nichols will be on with us in the second hour talking about this, but we're also going to be looking at these we have several in Vermont, we have Wisconsin, we have we have Minnesota. That's right, AM 950 radio. You're having your primary today. We've got we have a lot going on today politically. But let me start with you, Robert Patillo. You sent me this the text of this yesterday. And were you surprised? And let me know what is your understanding of what happened with the FBI?
Well, I wasn't surprised because I think anybody who's been paying attention to the January 6th hearings, everything that's been going on with regards to the investigation by the Justice Department, people have been saying, why isn't Mayor Garland acting? What is going on? Well, this is why, because they needed additional information. I think the biggest takeaway from this is the FBI has somebody on the inside that they knew exactly when Trump would be away. They knew exactly where the safe would be. They knew what documents they were looking for. So they've got somebody on the inside in Mar-a-Lago who's cooperating with law enforcement that is their quote-unquote informant. And I think that is the biggest takeaway from this. So are charges imminent? Probably not. Or is an indictment coming down in the coming weeks? Probably not. I think this is closer to the beginning of their investigation into Trump than the end of the investigation into Trump. But this is absolutely unprecedented that you would have a former president where the FBI felt the need to raid instead of simply having a negotiation to turn over documents. This means that there's absolutely no trust, and they believe that if they requested documents and information, that it would simply be either destroyed or adulterated in some shape or form, and that they needed to raid while the president wasn't home in order to procure such. So this is clear proof that the Justice Department is looking deeply into the actions of the president and what they are requesting. I think it said that it's a Records Act investigation saying that these were documents the president was not supposed to take with him after he left office. Just the fact that they believe that these documents still existed after almost 2 years out of office demonstrates that they have somebody working with them. So I'm going to be interested to see exactly what information came out of this raid and what will be the next acts in this investigation. Will they raid Trump Tower, for example, in New York? Will there be other members of the Trump orbit that will be brought in for questioning? I think this is the beginning, not the end, so there'll be more to come.
Call me, text me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. What do you think of this? Is this the beginning? And the beginning of what? The beginning of what? Let me go to Jim from Chicago before I go to the rest of the panel. Attorney C.K. Hoffler, who'll be dealing with some of this on her show today on WAOK at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time. Chicago time, it'll be 10 a.m. And, of course, Dwight McKee and Commissioner Brandon Johnson. Let me go to you, Jim from Chicago. What's on your mind, sweetie?
Good morning, Santita. Trump's been a lawless criminal his entire life. He's finally getting caught up with. And I think it's high time. He's been impeached twice. He unprecedented revolt against the United States. And it's high time that he's caught up with. in my opinion, I hope he spends his last buck defending himself in court. Anyway, good morning, Santita. Thank you.
Good morning, sweetheart. I'm glad to hear your voice. Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-9278. Really, our legal eagle here on the Santita Jackson Show, former president of the National Bar Association, the largest and oldest black bar association in the world, more than 65,000 lawyers. We're going to be talking with Daryl Jones at the top of the hour also. He's going to weigh in on this, but also tell us what happened with the Ahmaud Arbery case, in which the people who killed him were found guilty on federal civil rights charges. There's a lot happening. John Nichols will be weighing in on this, as well as these primaries that are occurring today. Up there in AM 950 Radio Land, up in Minnesota. Everybody, let's talk. CK, what did you make of this? I mean, this and on the anniversary, on the 48th anniversary of the resignation of Richard Nixon. I just can't think that that's a co-inky-dink.
Well, Santita, I don't believe in coincidences. I think that everything is planned by design, and this is planned by design. Yeah. I think that, President Trump has got to now, because I don't think he's been taking this seriously. I think he's got to now, and is going to now, begin to seriously fight back, because I do believe that this raid took him by surprise. Now, just as there may be an informant on the inside in Mar-a-Lago and in New York and throughout his organizations, because he does not have loyal people working for him. He may have loyal political followers, but there's been a lot of fallout with his employees because they feel that they were mistreated by him consistently. He has a history of mistreating his employees, allegedly. And so just as there's probably an informant who is guiding and helping with the time, and there's no coincidence, President Trump does not have informants within the Justice Department who are doing him justice, and he's not paying close attention to this. So I think there's going to be a shift in how he's defending himself now. He has severe problems. He's got the FBI, but he also has Fulton County DA Fonnie Willis, who is aggressively moving on a case involving the attempts at altering the election results in Georgia. He also has Letitia James in New York State, who is aggressively moving on his cases in New York. And he's actually going to be deposed. He's got two cases in New York. He's going to allegedly be deposed in some of those cases. And I believe there is some collaboration in terms of information, certainly in the New York situation, probably in Georgia, relative to his alleged misdeeds. So this is really, Santita, a sad day in our nation's history, just as it was a sad day when President Nixon resigned, but it is a strong day for justice. It's a strong day for justice. I don't know what this will lead to. I'm not optimistic that there will ultimately be indictments of President Trump. I'm not optimistic yet about that.
Why not?
But this is because I think that there are forces that believe that politically that would ignite probably some type of a civil war, firstly, or would ignite his base to cause him to have more victories than he's already had in these midterm elections, and that it could have a permanent or a devastating impact in terms of the presidential elections because of it. There are no coincidences. It would be timed such that it could potentially impact the outcome of the presidential elections. And it could ignite things. It could make him become a folkloric hero, fighting the system, fighting those that are breaking into his safe. They're confiscating information. Well, I can tell you one thing. If they broke into a safe, if they felt they had probable cause and they had sufficient legal documentation to do so, no one just decided, we're just going to break into a safe. That's not the level of that's not the cavalier nature with which this is being done. They are methodical, they're exacting, they have the documents. So it's not a question of his rights being violated. That's not what this is. This is a legal proceeding that is properly executed by the Department of Justice through the FBI, and they're going for broke, as well they should, to hold him accountable as much as they can for the events of January 6th. Will that result in an indictment? I'm still not positive of that because I think there's a political reality there. And then there's a concern about the office of the president. What precedent are we setting? However, from a justice standpoint, there should be indictments if the evidence is there. And the evidence every single day is pointing to President Trump. Every single day. Not some days, not maybe today. Every single day, the evidence that the January 6th committee is uncovering is pointing directly to him. They're linking the dots. They're connecting the dots to the president of the United States, President Trump. And that's very serious, very incriminating. So the Justice Department at some point is going to be at a crossroads, and they're going to have to make that tough call. I just don't feel that they're there yet. But Merrick Garland is methodically laying the groundwork for something very significant.
It's like this came out of, it didn't come out of nowhere. I mean, you're right. No. He's methodical and he went to not the big charges, but something granular, documents that he's holding, which is, it's a very, very, very smart way it's a very, very smart way of attacking. I'm just wondering how this is playing out, because if you look at social media, if you look at these activist elements of his supporters, they're very angry today. And that should not make people afraid, but it's something that we need to watch, because remember, all of these, and I've said this to you before, when you're under investigation, when you're under indictment, all of that's political. All of it is. I mean, Dr. King lived under, not indictment, but under investigation from the IRS, and he was tracked by, no one calls J. Edgar Hoover a fascist, but he certainly was that. It's interesting. No one talks about him today. I mean, and he was awful. And he made Dr. King's lives and Stokely Carmichael, Kwame Ture, and he drove Kwame Ture out the country. I mean, these are people who he was horrible. No one talks about that, but I digress. I know it's not a digression. It's a progression.
No, it's not a digression. Right, and Santita, but there were buildings named after J. Edgar Hoover.
The FBI building is still holding his name, even while it's crumbling.
Absolutely. And so that's just a hypocrisy. That's a hypocrisy of our country in some respects, what we've seen over time. I mean, it is what it is.
Yeah.
And people don't talk about it because it's not in vogue to talk about it. It wasn't in vogue to talk about Emmett Till, but people still talked about it. And people still talk about it. A lot of things that aren't in vogue doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it, but we definitely need to talk about this. The parallels between this and what happened to President Nixon. At a different time, this was much more severe than Watergate ever could have conceived of things. This was much more severe than anything that we've seen in U.S. history in terms of connecting the dots directly to a president's misdeeds, misconduct, malfeasance, malgovernance, all of that. I mean, there's so much evidence that's been uncovered, but there's so much evidence that we know exists. Because what's been uncovered is the tip of the iceberg. The only question is going to be, will they be able to seize it? Will they have the witnesses to corroborate some of that evidence? And will they be able to continue to connect the dots in such a methodical way to get the president to put President Trump in a position where he's going to be indicted? And will they pull that trigger?
Brandon,
what is the question?
Well, I mean, that is the question. Commissioner Brandon Johnson, what do you think?
Well, good morning, Santita. First of all, I don't know why the fellas are here. I can listen to you and CK all day. It reminds me of my upbringing. If you come from a large family and you're sitting around a table, your sisters and your aunt and your mother are going back and forth, you just sit there and listen. So for a moment there, I almost forgot where I was.
No, because you've taught history, you are a teacher. And if you were in a classroom today, you'd have to draw the parallel between August 8th, 1974 and August 8th, 2022. You'd have to.
Yeah, that's
and now
exactly
you're in
right.
Politics. You oversee budgets. This is what you do. That's why you here.
Yeah. That's right. They put a middle school teacher in charge of a $9 billion budget. It tells you that if you work towards justice, that people believe and trust in your leadership. And you said it spot on.
Santita, I think that the historical connection is what's most revealing in this moment. Two components here. One, it is very clear, though, that, the way the investigatory process works in this country, how patient and intentional it can be when it's going, quote unquote, after power. The lack of evidence that's needed to indict poor people in this country is astonishing. My wife and I were raising our family here in Austin on the west side of Chicago, and we have what are called $1 million blocks because the county, the city, the state has invested millions of dollars in the incarceration of Black folks, of poor people, of working people, while denying our same communities the opportunity to actually access education. And, what's quite disturbing here is you hear politicians talk about the pervasive crime that exists in many of these communities that are suffering from abject poverty. And what they're not saying is that these same politicians are not looking in the mirror. When you have someone as egregious and someone who is flagrant as someone like Donald Trump, to be able to refer to our communities as holes full of dung and crap, to look at entire swaths of people groups and categorize them as criminals and animals, while at the same time the greatest crimes against humanity have been propagated by the state in and of itself. And I think about how, poor people in this country, Black, brown, poor people all over this country, have to constantly prove that we're not guilty. I know you're talking about this in a couple of minutes, but Ahmaud Arbery had to prove that he was not guilty.
No, this conversation is going to carry over because there are connections all over the place, Yeah,
and that's absolutely how I would draw the connections in my classroom. Is that yes, Donald Trump is clearly a threat to our democracy, but he is not the first president. And he's certainly not the first representative of the state, if you will, that has been a threat to our democracy. And, as I think more deeply about the moment that we're in, while the criminalization of poverty continues to be the stump speech for politicians, no matter what stripe they possess or which wing they fly with, the truth of the matter is that this country has created some of the most obscene, harsh conditions that we have experienced in a lifetime. And the hope and the desire here, regardless of what is the sort of the ultimate play here, is that we don't simply look at the communities in which Donald Trump not just criticized, but demonized, that political parties, the interests of corporations have to take a deeper look in their role of how they've executed some of the most damning forms of pain against people who are struggling to make the ends meet every day. And so, there is a deep historical connection, but there's not a coincidence, as you said. It's more about a very, very obvious approach that this country has led, where so-called white-collar or corporate criminality can be protected, while the rest of us are exposed to the pain that they administer.
Absolutely.
That's the lesson for today.
And I would just say, as Democrats and Republicans, quite frankly, we have to be mindful and be honest about that. But wow, Dwight, you're going to set the table for us when we come up at 7:00, because I want you to talk about the political consequences, and they are real. They are real. These political consequences, boy. And it'll be very interesting to see how this is going to play out. Say, we are celebrating what happened in Kansas last week, and we certainly should do that. But in the meantime, President Trump has been racking up wins state by state. He got more second place votes. He is the highest second place finisher in the history of American politics on the presidential level. Nearly 75 million votes. That's a lot. And his people, and it's not just the Trumpers, you need to talk to people who support him and find out why they do, what it is that he represents to them. So it's very important. Whether you agree with him or not, you need to find that out. There's a lot going on here. It's a lot more than white nationalism. It's much more than that. People are angry. They're hurting. Remember, people toggled between Trump and Bernie in 2016 because folks are angry with the system. And now more and more Americans feel inclined to commit violent acts against the system, against the government, to prove their point and to make some change. That's where we are right now. So I want to know what you think about President Trump's home, as he said it was raided. Fortunately, he was not there. And the reason I say it's fortunate that he was not there, because only heaven knows what would have happened if he had been physically present. That's where we are.
10 seconds.
Let's talk about it, everybody, on the Santita Jackson Show. 773-763 WCPT.
The WCPT Veteran Minute. During the Civil War, 11% of the Confederate Army was made up of enslaved men.
And then who are we calling for this next hour?
Do you have Daryl Jones in there?
Supply ship known as the plane.
Yeah, you should still be on the schedule. Is it just Daryl Jones?
It's just Daryl Jones.
Okay.
And then you call John Nichols at the bottom of that.
While officers were sleeping,
At
Smalls,
at
along with
7:30.
16 others, took the plancher out of the Charleston
Oh
harbor.
boy.
They had to get
Okay.
into all
Well,
5
this is
checkpoints
great.
while heading
Well,
to
you all
open
can talk
waters,
amongst yourselves, and
looking
we're
for a
back on
Union blockade.
Facebook.
Smalls
Yay.
raised the white flag of surrender, letting Union soldiers.
But thank you again, Santita.
Guns.
I'm running around the city here and getting kids ready for camp.
Being a wealth of information.
But thank you. And,
Union
we're going to
Navy
be back in touch with
Stories
you
like
a little bit
Smalls
later
are one of the
today.
many factors
But,
convinced
just given the
President
nature of what
Lincoln to allow
happened, I
free
couldn't,
African-Americans to serve in the Union Army.
I could
This
not
has been
lead with this
a
today.
WCPT veteran.
No, you were spot on. Thanks for including me in that. And USDK, boy, that's some great household memories. You all, thank you for your all work. And the only way to do it, I don't know how. And Dwight,
Attorney Jones is up.
here for it.
Oh, that's my girl. I called her. She said, "Wait a minute, what happened?" She got ready real quick. She said, "Wait a minute, what?" I said, "I know you're up."
The only thing that I was waiting for somebody to tell me to go in the cabinet and get something. Because, by the time my aunts and mom get to talking, they're cooking and talking and politicking and getting people's hair done. So it's a beautiful tradition, and I'm glad I married one.
Hey,
You know what I mean?
that's right.
That's great too. That's great.
On the strength, you know what's going on.
People work.
Right.
Thank you.
He knows what's going on. That's what I love about that young man.
But Santita, this is a very serious development.
Mhm.
Very serious development.
On so many levels, my goodness.
Levels. But again, I'm not there yet in terms of embracing what it's going to mean ultimately in terms of indictment. It could mean that, but I don't feel yet that that's a fait accompli. I think there needs to be a lot more that has to happen.
Oh yeah, I agree with you.
Because you only have one bullet to shoot, and you gotta, and you can't shoot it with. The January 6th Commission has given the Justice Department a lot of evidence on a bow. And so now the Justice Department has to connect the dots.
Remembering Olivia Newton-John, who died yesterday.
Well, we have our guys here with us. Daryl Jones, running right into the buzzsaw of Trump. But what happened in Brunswick, Georgia, extremely important. And oh, my dear Olivia Newton-John, sending her much love today. Oh, girl, it hurt me. Oh.
But I think people don't realize she struggled with. She's a cancer survivor.
Oh,
and
yeah.
struggled, for a long time.
For years and years. Ooh. But girl, I was over in
that because she was always so present, ever present.
Yeah, and she looked fantastic throughout all of it, right? But You know, girl, I was in Denmark one summer, and let me tell you, Denmark is not Paris or London, okay? It is very, very Northern European. I had a great time, but it's, there were not a lot of black people there at all. But I said, you had a great time. But girl, that summer, I mean, Olivia Newton-John, Saturday Night Fever, Lord Jesus, it saved my life.
I'm Mike Gracia.
Oh,
Foley,
thank you,
Yeah, no,
hallelujah.
that's a great loss.
Oh boy, and she had a great career.
And streaming
Great career. I just thank God for her. And and Lamont Dozier died. Dwight, did you know that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, he died. Holland Dozier Holland.
Yeah.
He died. So I mean, we've lost two giants, but of course, he shaped the culture. He shaped the culture, and I think we have to be mindful of that. That he shaped the culture. He and Motown. That's
Veterans Memorial still looks great. 27 minutes.
You cannot make that up. God bless him.
Same southbound. About 8 and 16 minutes like Hookville
wow.
Junction. How about 17?
Hurt me yesterday when I heard about that.
Center. Kennedy, 30 minutes. O'Hare to downtown. About 27 miles an hour.
So hey, Daryl, how you doing?
390 to downtown. Stevenson fairly heavy. 52 minutes.
Santita, doing well. Doing well. It's just a very long day. You just kept going.
Wait, the day that you've had or the day that you're having?
Custom-made blind shades and shutters.
Both.
I was gonna say both. I was on mute, but I was saying both. It's early, but it's
the future
yep.
not be left behind.
Because for us, it's 8 o'clock.
What is the best?
So
for him, it's 20 o'clock. Just kidding. Your day did not end. Bless your heart.
Let's rebuild and restore Chicago. Vote for me for mayor of Chicago.
Oh boy. Lamont Dozier.
50 seconds.
They did not. And they have not talked about him the way that they should. And Dwight, but I know that you will.
Jobs are being lost and businesses are relocated. Let's find a way to lower our taxes to encourage residents.
30 seconds.
Stand by.
For mayor, City of Chicago, and I will work hard to find solutions.
Stand by.
I'm Dr. Willie Wilson.
Quiet, everybody. We're coming up.
Willie Wilson for mayor.
Okay, don't know if I'm up.
Change the world, change the world, change the world. We can change the world, we can change the world, change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love, it's not too late. Gotta save the children, we can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. The second hour, we've got a lot to talk about today. The FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago, where President Trump has his official residence. They even went into his safe. What do you make of that? Call me at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. What do you make of all of this, everybody? And of course, we'll be talking with John Nichols about all of these races today. There are several primaries. Wisconsin, Minnesota, up there with my AM 950 radio family. So much is going on today. And in Vermont, we'll be talking with him about that. But of course, about this unprecedented move. Nothing like this has ever happened in the history of the United States, where a president's home has been raided by the FBI. And unfortunately, he was in New York at his other home, dealing with some other legal matters. But and the reason I say it's fortunate is because I can only imagine, I don't want to imagine what it would have been like had he been home. I can't even wrap my mind around that. So we've got a tremendous panel. And of course, we have to talk about the Ahmaud Arbery case. because there was a decision, there was a verdict rendered there yesterday. Got a lot on our plate right here. Attorney Darrell Jones, of course, is giving us a live, really a live interpretation of that, because he was in court with attorney Barbara Arnwine. I understand Reverend Jesse Jackson was there yesterday with the Arbery family. Can't wait to hear about that. But we're talking about President Trump. I want to hear from you at 773-763-9278, 773-763-WCPT. But also call me, text me there. And but my WCPT 820 family here in Chicago, the largest progressive talk radio station, and AM 950 radio. Hope that you're getting out there and voting up there in Minnesota. Sending you much love today. We got a lot to talk about. Dedicating the show to the great Olivia Newton-John. Boy, oh boy, did she do so much to give us joy, from Grease to these wonderful, really pop country hits. Let Me Be There. I Honestly Love You. Let's Get Physical. There's so much that she did. She had a tremendous career that really extended from her childhood until her death. She struggled with cancer for several decades, from the age of 43 onward. And she did it in public. She did it with grace. She opened up a wellness center in Australia, which is where she was raised. She was a native of England. We just thank God for Olivia Newton-John today. May her works live on, and all the joy that she's given us down through the years. And Lamont Dozier, Holland Dozier Holland. Indeed, Holland Dozier Holland, no group of songwriters did more to shape American popular music. The most popular record company in the history of recorded popular music is Motown. But Baby Love, You Keep Me Hanging On. Even Two Hearts with Phil Collins, he never stopped producing, never stopped making us feel good. You Can't Hurry Love, Baby, I Need Your Love, Stop in the Name of Love, How Sweet It Is to Be Loved by You. Fish Ain't Biting, remember that hit by him? Yeah, there's so much that Lamont Dozier did, but wow, talk about a legacy. We love you, Lamont Dozier. Holland Dozier Holland, may you live forever. May you live for everybody. We've got primaries in Wisconsin, Minnesota, Vermont, and Connecticut. We'll be watching those today. We'll be looking at the Arbery case, what happened with the verdicts yesterday that were returned. We've got a lot to talk about on the Santita Jackson Show, so let's get to it, everybody. And today we're going to have a high of 73 degrees in Chicago, partly cloudy. It's quite cloudy right now. 86 degrees and sunny in Minneapolis, St. Paul. So there is no reason for you not to get out and vote, everybody. The Dow closed up 29 points yesterday. The NASDAQ closed down 13. The S&P 500 closed down 5. In Major League Baseball, the White Sox will be playing the Royals in Kansas City. The Cubs were triumphant over the Nationals 6-3. And the Twins will be playing the Dodgers out in L.A. In the WNBA, the Storm will be facing off against the Sky here in Chicago, everybody. Today is the anniversary, the painful anniversary of the atomic bombing of Nagasaki by the United States. Yes. And yesterday was the anniversary, August 8th, of the Nixon resignation, the same day that they raided the home of President Trump. What do you think about that? What are the political consequences? What is the fallout? In the meantime, before we get to that, we want everyone to get some financial freedom. If you don't have credit, if you need to build your credit, if you have high credit card debt, if you want to buy a home, but you know you don't have that down payment, how can you develop a plan? What should the plan be to get you to home ownership? Well, Team Hochberg can help you do that. If you want a reverse mortgage, or if you want to find out what it is, if you want to refinance your existing home, if you need to fix it in order to keep it, if you need to secure a VA loan or other loans, call Team Hochberg at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or visit them at 56david.com, 56david.com. Let me tell you what's going to happen. When you call them the first time, you're going to get a free consultation. I advise you to tell them everything. That's what Tom and Sonia did. 2 kids constantly struggle to pay their 6% mortgage rate, which has, gone up and down. And they've had minimum payments on their 17 credit cards in which they owed $100,000. They said, well, you know what? We'll just give them a try. Why not? Why not call Team Hochberg? And guess what? Team Hochberg helped them to secure an FHA loan. They got a payment plan for their 17 credit cards, and they lowered their monthly payments by over $2,800, everybody, getting them effectively above water. So call Team Hochberg. That could be your story. Call them at 855-56-DAVID, 855-56-DAVID, or visit them at 56david.com so you can get your financial freedom and your financial life in order. We've got a tremendous panel. Before we talk to you, Daryl Jones, about what happened in Brunswick, Georgia, I mean, we're still talking about what happened. Attorney C.K. Hoffler and Attorney Daryl Jones. We're talking with Attorney C.K. Hoffler, Attorney Robert Patillo, Commissioner Brandon Johnson just left us, and Dwight McKee. I want you to set the table for us because there are political consequences. I mean, let's get real. Indictments, investigations, all of that. Political. There's some people who get protected. There's some people, we pull back the covers on them. What do you think could be, or what are we seeing as the political fallout with this, the political consequences? Former President Trump supporters are very angry today.
Well, I think that the timing couldn't have been worse for this. It's for the first time since he's been president, Biden and the Democrats have developed some momentum. They gotten some bills passed that they didn't look like were going to get passed. They had really, taken the abortion issue and been able to create a momentum with white women around it. They had some real major successes in international policy. For the first time in this presidency, they really began to get some momentum. And now they have flipped that because by raiding Trump's place, they've given the Republicans a whole counter narrative to discuss. And they've taken all the momentum away from all the great things they've been able to do for the last month and given Trump all of this ammunition with a crowd of his that's already conspiracy-based and paranoid. And so what happens in this, in my opinion, is that it all looks political. It would have been better for them to have waited to after the election and then gone after Trump as opposed to before the election, because now it looks like because he's been winning these primaries, his candidate's been winning these primaries, it looks like they're afraid of him and they're trying to neutralize him from running. And so now it looks like they're anti-democratic, they're autocratic. All of the mean things they said about him, he not can say about them. And it's going to create, in my opinion, a tremendous backswell of his supporters and a lot of folk who would have been neutral, who now will make him the martyr and say, yeah, maybe they are really afraid of this guy because maybe he is a candidate that they can't handle and he's independent enough that they want him out of office. They don't want him to run again because he's the heads-on favorite to win. I think the timing couldn't have been worse.
Wow, I hadn't thought of it that way, CK. But but every action merits an equal and opposite reaction. Those laws of physics really do come in handy. We never thought we'd use them. Well, those of us who are not physics majors, of course.
And,
CK?
Santita, it really takes Dwight McKee, as always, to put it into proper context because of his brilliance, of course, and the historical nature of politics in this country. And to bring it out, because I really hadn't thought of it that way. I thought that there would be backlash. For sure. But I was looking at what is going to be the best time.
Sure.
It's never going to be a good time.
But you know what, CK, if I could interrupt you here, Dwight knew, not to talk over you, Dwight, but Dwight knew Fred Hampton. And Dwight, the night after Fred Hampton was killed, went looking for the most wanted man in America, who was retiring Congressman Bobby Rush, who was an outlaw. You and Mike Knighton, right, Dwight McKee?
and
Double O?
WL.
And W.L. Lillard?
Double O and
Yeah. Of course, W.L. Lillard, who had a very highly regarded black security firm. They protected my family for decades. And so working with Reverend Jackson as he worked with Dr. King, seeing Dr. King killed 1 year to the day, to the minute of his announcing that he was in opposition to the Vietnam War. It was okay when he was discrimination and we're going to desegregate America, but when he went up against that military-industrial complex, the threats against him increased, and it was very clear in the last year that the walls were closing in on him. So, I mean, not to break your train of thought, CK, but Dwight does bring a unique perspective because he's seen this up close and personal before. CK?
No, absolutely, absolutely, and I think it's an incredibly important perspective, Dwight, that we need to hear. We need to be reminded, because sometimes we can be myopic in our views of things. We can just be looking at focusing on one little thing and not the big picture, not looking at the historical context, not looking at politics in terms of what this means at this point in history, what we've experienced in the past, and what we can expect to see in the future as a result. And so I think it's just a great perspective for us to hear and to learn about, because we don't want to keep on making the same crazy mistakes. And we're already such a divided country. There are people who are, according to social media, and this has been going on for a while, but it's been heightened now, who are really positioning for a race war, a civil war, if you will. And they're really serious about it. Actually articulating that. It's one thing when you hear that some people are thinking about that. It's another thing when you see a few posts on social media. It's a whole different issue. And it becomes a whole different issue when there are massive posts and when there are training camps and when there are people who are committing acts of violence in the name of, with manifestos. That's a very, very different type of an America that we're seeing evolve. And it is centered around, politics. And we saw part of this during the January 6th attempted coup. Or not attempted, but coup d'etat that was unsuccessful. We saw that. So we are headed, I think, we're about to experience some very, very more dark moments, unfortunately, in this country.
Wow. Well, Dwight McKee. So where do we go from here?
Oh, we'll see how this plays out. It's I'm hoping that Trump handles this a little better than he normally handles situations, because he understands the gravity. That if he tries to play this as a counter-revolution or as an anti-democratic moment, he knows he's going to incite his crowd to that vigilante justice that they believe in. They have all these militias that's been training for such a moment like this, who feel like the government is against them already, and it will give them fuel to go and start shooting people. So I'm hoping that he does not like to ignite this fire, because it's so weak, and the country is on the wreck of a civil war. And I think at some point he's going to realize that and no, at least that's my hope.
Well, it's my hope too. It's my hope. We have callers, but we've got Attorney Darrell Jones. We're catching him in the middle of a lot, because indeed, yesterday, not only did this happen, but before this happened, Ahmaud Arbery, there was a verdict verdicts, shall I say, several in his case. Didn't realize that there was going to be yet another case beyond what we saw. What's the difference between these verdicts and the ones before, Attorney Darrell Jones?
Thank you, and good morning, Santita. It's really interesting watching everything that's unfolding here in Brunswick. The state case that occurred before was focused on the murder of Ahmaud Arbery and whether or not they could prove that these three men, Travis McMichaels, Gregory McMichael, and William Roddy Bryant, killed Ahmaud Arbery. Yesterday, we had the sentencing for federal hate crimes that was charged against those same three men here in Brunswick, Georgia. And it's in the federal court this time, dealing with the federal hate crimes statute. And for the first time in Georgia's history, the federal hate crime statute was applied, and they convicted these three men. So yesterday was their sentencing. And so in the sentencing yesterday, in essence, the jury had decided that the reason that William Roddy Bryant, Greg McMichaels, and Travis McMichaels killed Ahmaud Arbery was because he was a black man, and basically no other reason. That it was a hate crime that was directed at their culture of hate, their evil, everything that was embodied within the three of them was the reason that they killed Ahmaud Arbery. So the judge yesterday handed down the sentencing on these three men, and for both Gregory McMichael and Travis McMichael, they both received a life sentence in the for the federal, which will run concurrent with the life sentences that they've received in the state court from the state of Georgia. William Roddy Bryant, who was the person that actually filmed the killing of Ahmaud Arbery, received a life with the possibility of parole sentence in the state court, and then in the federal court now, the judge sentenced him to another 35 years, which would run concurrent along with the sentence that they've received in the state court. One of the real interesting things I think that came out in this case was that members of the Arbery family had the opportunity to address the court. And Marcus Arbery, the father of Ahmaud Arbery, was speaking. And as he was speaking, he addressed his comments, and I should say that Gregory McMichael is the father of Travis McMichael. They were sentenced separately. They were not all sentenced at the same time. They had different slots that they individually came up for sentencing. And so when the father was being sentenced, Marcus Arbery, rather than addressing the judge directly as he was directed to do, turned to Gregory McMichael. And what I thought was just an incredible moment was when Marcus Arbery turns to Gregory McMichael and says to him that as a father, I don't like you. I'm afraid, of what you've done. And from father to father, you have failed your son. You put your son in this position. And now your son has put his 3-year-old son in the position of learning hate. And that was one of the highlights, I think, that really came out of that, because it really lifted up the hate that was embodied within that McMichael family and how to try to break that hate. So there was a lot that went on within that trial, Santita. And, one of the things that Gregory McMichael, the father, said was that he had no malice in his heart, nor did his son have malice in their heart after they killed Ahmaud Arbery in this fashion. And the only other piece I really wanted to be certain that I highlighted here was that Travis McMichael was the one who blew the 3 holes in Ahmaud's chest. And he made no statements at all, never said he was sorry or anything else, just a tremendous, tremendous day in the court. But justice did prevail, as 2 of them did receive a life sentence, and then William Roddy Bryant received that 35-year sentence.
How do they do that? How do you stand in the courtroom after all of that, after you've heard Ahmaud Arbery's mother weeping loudly as she sees the image of her son with these holes in his body? How do you not turn to them and say, I'm sorry? How do you not do that? Who are you? What are you? Where is your humanity? What's wrong with you? How dare you look upon anyone and talk about their humanity? How dare you talk to Black people about the fathers that they do not have when you made it illegal for us to have families for more than 200 years? And yet we still rose and had them. Are you kidding me? Who are you? Who are you who decides to get angry and then you go out and kill everybody you see? Who are you? You need to be grown enough, man enough, woman enough, human enough to ask that question and answer it. Who are you? Enough. Standing in that courtroom with that family, you can't even say, hey, I'm sorry. I haven't worked all of this out in my head, haven't worked it out in my heart, but I'm sorry. What's wrong with you? And you need to be grown enough to ask that question. And for those of you Trumpers who are out there listening and who are on my chat line, be grown enough to call in. I'm not going to attack you, but you need to stand on the facts.
30 seconds.
You need to be grown enough to call me. Stop trolling. Stop playing. Let's grow up in our politics, everybody. Don't play with me. Let's stop playing with each other. I'm grown enough to handle it. You all have threatened my family. You've done it all to us. So I'm not frightened of you. There's nothing else you can do to me. Enough. Grow up and call in. Or be quiet. Back with more of the Santita Jackson Show in just a few minutes. Okay, I couldn't hear you in the background. Yes?
Yeah, I got a 7 o'clock Zoom call.
But thank you so much, Dwight.
All righty.
Thank you, hon. Well, CK, he gave us another view of this, huh?
He sure did.
I mean,
He sure did.
Okay.
And we have to start thinking in these terms, being more globally, looking at it. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, and it's very helpful because he has lived through so much of this, Daryl. And when you've seen this up close and personal, we knew who J. Edgar Hoover was when they still had an FBI show on television in which they were celebrated. Nobody but us knew how awful he was. He was a hero. They named the building, the newly built FBI building, after him. He was a hero.
John Nichols is on.
And he was a horror. And they still have his name, but they need to keep his name on the building. Because the only people they're investigating, they're not investigating the white nationalists and the white supremacists. They're investigating Black Lives Matter. So they have not changed. And I don't know how it is that we get a black president and suddenly we trust these people who have been investigating us and who still do it. What's wrong with you? Hello? Hi, John Nichols. How you doing, honey bun?
Chicago traffic and weather update.
I am very well, dear. How are you?
Oh, you caught me mid-rant. But we've been talking about President Trump. We talked about President Trump. We talked about Ahmaud Arbery. Are you still there, Daryl, or did you leave?
No, I'm here. I'm still in Brunswick. Then I'll be leaving to go to Wisconsin for the primary.
Oh, my goodness. Well, and of course, I've got John Nichols here, the national correspondent for The Nation, and the author of his latest book is Coronavirus Criminals and Pandemic Profiteers. And he's talking to us about these primaries. But, I have several callers, John, because, of course, if you would weigh in on the FBI's on the FBI raid on Mar-a-Lago, I'd like that very much, because that would be important as we pivot. But also, Attorney Jones was in the courtroom yesterday with the Arbery family as they sentenced the killers. And he was just saying how no one said they were sorry to that family. Can you just tell him very quickly what Mr. Arbery said to Mr. McMichael?
This is Elliot Richardson from
Marcus Arbery, Ahmaud's dad, turned to Gregory McMichael, who's the father of Travis McMichael, who's the one that killed him. And he said to Gregory McMichael that I don't like you. As a father, I don't like you. And the hate that Travis McMichael has is hate that he learned from you. And Travis Michael now has a son, and hopefully his son now will not learn the hate that Travis McMichael learned from his father. That want to move into neighborhoods. It was just an incredible, powerful moment of just father to son, and breaking the cycle of hate that he was lifting up.
Let's revitalize neighborhood business.
No, I was thinking that exact same thing. It does sound like precisely that an attempt to break that cycle of hate. And actually, what a gift to the son, or to the child, because at some point that change has to be made.
Is proud to support
you're in a profound moment there.
Class. We do it with our monthly Union Strong
It was really interesting because the McMichaels and William Roddy Bryant all asked to have their sentence
20 seconds
federal system, not the state system, because they were afraid for their lives, for their safety in the state prison in Georgia. And one of the things that Marcus Arbery said was, "You're asking for us to have mercy on you and to not put you in a situation where you're afraid, when that is precisely what you did tonight."
Change the world.
Stand by.
Change the world. Change the world. We can change the world. We can change the world. Change the world.
This is the Santita Jackson Show.
War and hate to a place of love. It's not too late. Gotta save the children. We can't wait. Let's change the world. I am breathing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Santita Jackson Show. You know it's the bottom of the hour on Tuesday, in the second hour of the Santita Jackson Show. So we've got John Nichols, national correspondent from The Nation. Of course, you have got all of these primaries happening today. We've got to look at that. We've got to look at those primaries. We've got to look at what's going to happen, or what we're seeing in Wisconsin, in Vermont, in Connecticut, and in Minnesota. So we got to talk about that. But we've been talking about the Ahmaud Arbery, that sentencing, and I'm so glad that Attorney Darrell Jones from the Transformative Justice Coalition, he and Barbara Arnwine do such great work, and they'll be on the air at 12 o'clock Eastern Time, 11 o'clock Central Standard Time, talking about what they saw in the courtroom in Brunswick, Georgia. But no doubt talking about President Trump and what this raid means, not just legally, but politically. There's a lot going on here, John Nichols. And John, I want you to let me know what you think about where this all fits with the Trump, where the Trump raid fits. He was fortunately he was not at Mar-a-Lago, because I can only imagine that would have gone south, and it could have had tragic consequences, quite frankly, had he been there. So, and one of our first guests, Attorney Robert Patillo, host on WAOK, Southeastern Regional Director for Rainbow Push. And of course, you're joined by Attorney C.K. Hoffler, who will be on WAOK just after this show at 10 o'clock Central Standard Time, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, talking about this and so many other legal issues. He said, look, it's clear the FBI has an informant on President Trump's staff. So there's that. Because the FBI, they don't come into your home. They don't come into your presence unless they know exactly what they're looking for and they know where to go in and grab it. And then you've got, we just have a lot going on here. We've got the political consequences, the political fallout, which is real. And Dwight McKee, who just left, someone who knew Fred Hampton, he and Aline Walker were the youngest members of the founding board of Operation Push, very involved in civil rights as a young teenager. He said, look, politically, this could not have happened at a worse time for the Democrats after having had such a great week, because now you give the Republicans an excuse to say that this is politically motivated. Quite frankly, I hadn't thought about it that way. CK and I, Attorney CK Hoffler, who's still with us, said, really hadn't thought about it that way, but he flipped that. What do you make of this before we get into, the callers who want to speak? And I'd like for you to speak to them. What do you make of this? I mean, and on the anniversary of the Nixon resignation, no less, you being the historian that you are. Wow. John Nichols.
Well, the timing is pretty striking, isn't it? That anniversary of the Nixon resignation. But I think that there's a lot on the table here. The core thing to understand is this is part of an ongoing investigation, and in fact, part of several ongoing investigations into the former president of the United States. It's a relatively unprecedented circumstance, and it is played out in something that is actually a not completely unheard of development, and that is a raid by federal agents on a site where they think there is evidence of criminal wrongdoing. And those who suggest that there are people on the inside that are cooperating, I think there's absolutely no question of that. I also think that that's going to drive former President Trump nuts because he will become more and more paranoid, more and more obsessed with who's ratting him out, for lack of a better term. It's also important to understand you had cooperation between two federal agencies, the FBI and the Secret Service, to make sure that it went off smoothly. I don't think there's any question they did it on a day that they knew Trump wasn't going to be at Mar-a-Lago. And they did so, I think, both for the convenience of that and also because they didn't want to create that confrontation situation. Now, the core thing to understand is that they're gathering evidence for what will be almost certainly a criminal charge. And the fact of the matter is that the violation of the Presidential Records Act is the most easily proven criminal charge against President Trump. It's a serious one, but it can't be the only one. There has to be, I mean, if indeed the Department of Justice charges former President Trump, they need to have more than just a violation of the Presidential Records Act. This is one part of a bigger whole. Last thing I will say on it is that the Republican response to it was predictable. They started screaming and yelling the moment they heard about it. Most of it was theatrical, but I was particularly concerned by the response of Kevin McCarthy, the Republican leader in the House, who said that if they take charge, they will immediately begin to investigate the investigation. And while any leader in the House of Representatives has a responsibility to conduct oversight and to be supportive of oversight, the way that McCarthy phrased it really sounded an awful lot like using the House of Representatives, if it's under Republican control, for obstruction of justice and to actually weaponize the House of Representatives as a tool to try and prevent accountability for Donald Trump. So we've got a whole new world of hurt opening up as regards the midterm elections and the question of who will be given power in the House of Representatives, because that will be very consequential for these investigations.
Do you mind if we pivot to some questions about, or some comments about this, and then I want to talk about these primaries, because even in the midst of all of this, I mean, and I've got whiplash, John Nichols. In the midst of all of this, we are still in the primary season. I mean,
Well, in fact, it's more important than ever, because the primaries will set the stage for that November election. That November election will decide whether the Congress of the United States is supportive of the rule of law or whether it seeks to obstruct the application of the rule of law to someone even so powerful as a former president of the United States.
Okay, make in plain language, does that mean that if the Congress flips to the Republican column, that they will then start going after Democrats? Is that what you're saying?
It won't just be that. They will seek to undermine this investigation. This is criminal investigation into wrongdoing. In the United States, the law is supposed to apply to everyone, from the most disempowered and disenfranchised to the most powerful. In this case, a criminal investigation of a former president is a very big deal. It's a very, very challenging circumstance. It certainly should be scrutinized. There should always be care to make sure that every I is dotted, every T is crossed. But if the Congress of the United States becomes literally a tool for obstructing justice, using its power to try and undermine and thwart this investigation, as frankly happened during Trump's first term, when you saw Devin Nunes and others, clearly working with the White House to undermine investigations, that becomes a very, very serious matter. And whether that happens will be decided by midterm elections. That will decide whether the House of Representatives is led by Nancy Pelosi or Hakeem Jeffries, or is led by Kevin McCarthy, who has sworn his loyalty to Donald Trump.
Let me go to, let me get some comments, everybody, so that we can get as much into this segment as we can. Let me start with you, Stephanie. Stephanie, what's on your mind today?
Well, hi, good morning,
Good
everyone.
morning.
What's on my mind is, well, for the first thing, when you ask the question who those people were in the Aubrey case, my question is not who are they, but what are they? I don't even know if they're human anymore. But anyway, as far as Trump goes, we have to prosecute him. He spent 4 years committing things that were from unethical to treasonous and everything in between. We cannot let the Republicans and how they feel, or the Trumpers and how they feel, stop us from doing our jobs. We can't stop them. We can't let them stop us from running this country and sticking to our Constitution. Trump has committed many crimes. He's going to be a martyr either way it goes. If he loses, of course he's going to be a martyr. If he wins, then they're going to be emboldened to say we can do anything we want. And the United States government cannot stop us. So we have to, and we can't worry about them. When the time comes, they may settle down or they may get emboldened, but we just need to prepare for either end. But we got to do this. We don't have a choice.
Okay, let me hear from Earl. Earl, what's on your mind today?
Hi, Santita.
Hey,
Hi,
Earl.
Santita. Thanks for taking my call.
Yes.
Can you hear me, Santita?
I sure can. What's your comment?
Okay, I wanted to make two quick comments. One, I think the raid on Largo might be a little late because it was reported that Trump was willing to eat documents so it wouldn't be found and flush the documents down the toilet, so much so that Secret Service and the FBI would have to go into the plumbing to unclog it and pull the documents out of the plumbing and piece them back together and store them that way. So he's had months and months and months to deal with some of this stuff. And he knows what he did, and so he knows what kind of documents he has at the place. And the other thing I wanted to say is to your question earlier about
just very quickly,
humanity and stuff. Okay. When you denigrate, belittle, dehumanize people, it's very easy to treat them like animals, like dogs, like cattle. And so they don't see us as people. They don't see us as human beings with a soul. So it's easy for them to do whatever they feel justified in doing. And that's been throughout our history, starting with the Native Americans and up until the present day. So those are the two quick comments I wanted to make. Thank you, Santita.
Thank you, Mr. Earl. Thank you. And Mark, what's on your mind today?
Good morning, Santita. Thanks for taking my call.
Good morning.
I just wanted to say that yesterday I was toggling between MSNBC, CNN, and Fox, and I was struck by how subdued the anger was on Fox by the few guests that I saw for a few minutes. So I just wonder if maybe the Republicans are fatigued by this, not the leadership, the upper echelon, perhaps are just as interested in seeing this guy out of the way as they accuse the Democrats of wanting to get him out of the way.
Well, remember, even with
comment.
Fox, you're dealing with the establishment. What Trump, and I think we have to be very, very careful and be very mindful of the fact that he represents the anti-establishment. He is not a true Republican. I mean, in the same way that Bernie Sanders is not he was going to run on Ross Perot's ticket. So these are, he's a businessman who's transactional. I think there's just a lot going on with him philosophically. But what he chose to do was represent the disaffected. And I think we need to be very, very, very clear on that. And when you see MSNBC, Fox, ABC, NBC, CNN, CNN used to be anti-establishment. That is not what they are now. When they were absorbed, when they took Ted Turner out of the mix, they completely changed CNN. All of the corporate-driven media is that, and they basically give you one message, and they tailor it to different cultures. And so I think we need to be mindful of that. I think we need to keep our eyes open to the people who Trump is speaking to. You have to keep your eyes open to anyone who feels that they're on the outside. Mark, I think we have to really, really be careful, which is why these elections today are so consequential in Wisconsin, in Minnesota, in Vermont, and in Connecticut, because they are harbingers of where we might be going, because John Nichols, President Trump, has been winning state after state after state. He's won the majority of the races that his candidates have been in. So what is special about Wisconsin and Vermont and Connecticut and Minnesota today? Let's start with Wisconsin.
Sure. Today is a very important day. We put it in that perspective. This is the day in which the races will be set. Many of the contests will be put in play, and we'll know who's running against who. And we can bring it right down to the issue that we've been discussing here. If Republicans take control of the House of Representatives and the Senate, they will have the ability to make Joe Biden the most lame duck president in the history of the United States, to thoroughly disempower Kamala Harris as vice president, to undermine anything that this administration might seek to do, and also to prevent accountability. And in Wisconsin, the great question is, will Ron Johnson, who has voted with Trump at every turn, continue as the U.S. Senator? Today's primary on the Democratic side will determine his opponent. That opponent is almost certainly going to be Mandela Barnes, the 35-year-old lieutenant governor of Wisconsin, who's had really, in many senses, a remarkable rise. His opponents in the Democratic Party generally have chosen to stand aside and to endorse him because Barnes has consolidated support within the Democratic Party. Now he goes into an incredibly intense fall election. So this is a key pivot point there. On the Republican side, you have a fascinating situation because there is a primary for governor. The Democratic governor, Tony Evers, faces no serious opposition, but they're choosing an opponent for Evers. And the three Republicans that are running have all curried Trump's favor in different ways. In fact, to such an extent that last Friday, Donald Trump flew into Wisconsin to endorse one of the candidates, Tim Michels. Donald Trump is also trying to have the Speaker of the State Assembly, Robin Vos, defeated in his Republican primary because he does not believe Vos has done enough to try and overturn the results of the 2020 election. So just as you saw in Arizona a week ago, where Donald Trump supported a slate of candidates who were aligned with his big lie about the 2020 election and with his policies in general, now in Wisconsin, you see, again, trying to take charge of the state party, to have his candidates become the nominees of the party, and to have those candidates advance his agenda at the state level. So we'll learn a lot today. And if Trump's candidate wins the primary for governor, a guy named Tim Michels, and if by some chance the Assembly Speaker is defeated in the primary, then Trump's control over the Wisconsin Republican Party will be confirmed top to bottom. I'm not sure the Speaker will be defeated, but I do think there's a very good chance that Michels could win. So this is a big deal day as regards what you were referring to, Santita, which is the reality that Donald Trump still maintains overwhelming control of the Republican Party. And one of the things sort of shocking is the pundit class, the political and media elite, who run around saying, "Oh, I think Trump's grip is weakening," or "I think maybe he's not quite as powerful as he was." Every indication is that he is growing in power. And if you have any doubts about it, look at the response to the raid or the search at Mar-a-Lago, where you saw Republicans across the country and Congress immediately line up behind Trump.
So, what does it look like for Mandela Barnes? He's got it today, because I know that Andrew Yang supported someone else.
Yes, that is very true. There is still a primary today on the Democratic side. Mandela Barnes was one of 4 leading candidates in that primary. The other 3 leading candidates, Sarah Godlewski, the state treasurer, Tom Nelson, the Outagamie County executive and a very progressive candidate, and Alex Lasry, an executive with the Milwaukee Bucks, all dropped out about a week and a half ago, 2 weeks ago, and endorsed Barnes. That was a remarkable thing. It's almost never been seen in politics. But there's still some candidates on the ballot. And one of those candidates is a guy, Stephen Alakara, who was the founder of something called the Millennial Action Project. He's a young guy who's been very active in seeking reform of government and new election systems. And he is supported by Andrew Yang. And I think it'll be interesting to watch what kind of vote Alakara gets. But prior to the developments of the last couple of weeks, Alakara was polling at around 1%. And so I think the likelihood is, by most measures, that Mandela Barnes will win the primary. It's very likely. The question is, what is his percentage? If it is a very big percentage, if it's a great big win for Mandela Barnes, as I think a lot of people expect, that really gives him some real benefits, some serious benefits going into the race against Ron Johnson, because, as you well know, often Democrats are divided. In this case, there's very little evidence of division. In fact, a great deal of evidence that the party has come together. I think partially because Mandela Barnes is a remarkable candidate who has worked the state very well and served the state very well. But also because there's a deep, deep fear of having Ron Johnson serve another term in the Senate, because he's been such a destructive figure. And I think even some Republicans recognize that fact.
What about Minnesota? What's going on there today?
There's a lot going on in Minnesota. There's a lot of primaries in the state. It's obviously, like Wisconsin, Minnesota is a state that's competitive. It's a little more democratic. Those Democratic primaries become especially important. By and large, the state government positions are held by Democrats. People like Keith Ellison, the Attorney General, Governor Walz, and others. They will be renominated. But there's one race that's really of note, and I've written about it a good deal, and that is the contest in the 5th Congressional District. That's the Minneapolis area. And Ilhan Omar, who was one of the first 2 Muslim women in Congress, is seeking re-election. And it is, to my mind, been a remarkable member of Congress who has sought to use her position to speak up for and speak on behalf of the most vulnerable people in the U.S. and around the world. She's an incredible advocate for human rights. And she's being challenged, and she's being challenged by a lot of the political establishment in the Minneapolis area. Her opponent is a former city council member who has been endorsed by the sitting mayor of the city and by the city's large newspaper, the Minneapolis Star Tribune, and has received a lot of money from conservative and establishment corporate donors. And so Ilhan Omar's got a genuine race. I think she'll win, but it's one that you do have to keep an eye on, because she, well, again, I would argue serving as a remarkable member of Congress, she's somebody who's been willing to speak truth to power, and power doesn't like that. So power often tries to defeat such folks. But there is good evidence that she and other members of the squad, like Rashida Tlaib, who just had a great big primary win last week, Ayanna Pressley, who will be easily renominated in Massachusetts, and AOC, who's in great shape in New York. There is evidence that people do like these outspoken, generally younger women who are people of color who bring religious diversity to Congress. And so my sense is that Ilhan Omar is in pretty good shape.
Can you stay with us just a couple more minutes? I wanted you to give a few more comments. We're back on Facebook. Yay. But CK, I'm about 30 you're going to be on, you and Daryl Jones will be on the air. You'll be on at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time today on WAOK. Of course, Barbara Arnwine and Attorney Daryl Jones will be on WOL and streaming on barbaraarnwine.com at 12 noon Eastern Standard Time, 10 and 11 our time. You check them out, everybody. They'll be dealing with a lot. I cannot wait I can't wait for your shows today. They're going to be fantastic. WAOK CK. CK Hoffler on WAOK at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time today. Attorney Daryl Jones, Attorney Barbara Arnwine, 12 noon Eastern Standard Time on WOL today. I'm Santita Jackson. Stay right here on Facebook, everybody. We're going to be talking for just a bit. And, I'm just going to share with you this. I want all people to listen to this show. James Hertz, bless your heart. You are a Trumper, and I appreciate that, and I respect it. But you don't know what my opinions are because you've never called in, not one time. You can say you've listened to me, but you've not asked me a question, not one. And that's part of the problem that we have in America today. We do not have full-on discourse. You hear snippets of people. You don't know what I'm thinking. And you won't know until you ask. And you must do it respectfully. That is my requirement on this show. That we have respectful, civilized discourse. And I require it on my chat line as well. President Trump doesn't have enemies here. He has people with whom he will find disagreement. But I do agree with him on bringing the HBCU office back into the White House and refunding black colleges. I tip my hat to him for that. But there are a lot of other things that he's done that have been very destructive. And we need to be honest about that. And other presidents have done the same thing. We need to be honest about that too. And clean it up wherever the corruption is. Stay right here on the Santita Jackson and Friends page. And I love you, everybody. Can't wait to be with you tomorrow on the Santita Jackson Show. God bless. CK, as John Nichols is here for just a couple more minutes, and Daryl Jones, I don't know if you're running right now, but when we see what happened yesterday with President Trump, and we see just how consequential all of these races are, when we ask people to make sure that they're registered to vote, to make sure that they do get registered to vote, to make sure that they do vote. John Nichols, when we look at what happened yesterday and what we look at what could happen in November of 2022, we see how consequential your vote is. I mean, John, this could be, say the Congress flips, and we're only a few votes away from that happening. One vote away from it flipping in the U.S. Senate, and a handful of votes away from it flipping in the Congress. It's a lot, John.
No, I think there's no question. This November election will be strikingly consequential for the United States. And we say that all the time. Every election matters, and every election is important. But this one stands out because we no longer have a situation where you see a lot of independent-minded or independent-thinking Republicans. By and large, they have formed a bloc that is aligned with Donald Trump. If they get control of the House and the Senate, which is certainly within the realm of possibility this fall, they will not govern with the intent of getting things done. They will govern with the intent of setting the stage for a 2024 run for the presidency by Donald Trump. And anyone who doubts that need only look at House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy's statement following the search of Donald Trump's Mar-a-Lago accounts. McCarthy's statement was absolutely clear and unequivocal. They will weaponize the oversight processes of the House of Representatives to undermine the investigation into Donald Trump. I mean, that's an open admission by Kevin McCarthy that they're willing to obstruct justice because they are so loyal to the former president. So all of that comes into play in the November election, not to mention that we're also going to have choices that will have a huge impact on the right to choose, a huge impact on a host of other economic and social and racial justice issues, as well as saving the planet. So it's a pretty big election.
Well, things have just gone so. I mean, CK, are you still there? And Daryl,
I'm still here.
you know what
I'm
is
still here.
what is unsettling to me is when I think of what could have happened had he been present at Mar-a-Lago, that is former President Trump. That is what is upsetting to me. Not had he been present, but had his Secret Service detail, his protective detail that would be tasked with traveling with him. See, because we forget that these are human beings, and of course, your Secret Service detail, unless they would be favorable to you. And we learned, John Nichols, from Abraham Bolden's book. Who was Abraham Bolden? He's the first black person, a black Secret Service agent assigned to the White House. And he was personally assigned to the White House by John F. Kennedy. What shocked him when he got there was that he found out how hated John Kennedy was. And it unsettled him. He went to his superiors, John and CK, and guess what? They turned a blind eye and ear to him. He said, but you got to understand, they're so hostile to President Kennedy. President Kennedy is not safe. This is not the first time that the Secret Service has been politicized. John and CK, this is not new. We had some Secret Service agents, at least one or two, reassigned. We felt that they were hostile to Reverend. In '83, one guy, he could not manage a smile, and it was very clear that he did not want to be on the detail. We told them, we told the powers that be, and they removed him immediately. Because you're not safe when people don't like you, when they're protecting you. So John, I can only imagine what could have happened had he been there. And that, and that just lets me know that's the state of American politics right now, when more and more Americans feel that they are within their right to protest the government violently, John.
Yeah. Well, obviously that's what we saw on January 6th. And, but I will point out that all evidence is that, at least in this case, the Secret Service on the ground did cooperate with the FBI. Mm-hmm. And frankly, my sense is that that cooperation began before the raid itself, because I do think that the raid was timed to occur when Donald Trump wasn't present physically. Mm-hmm. And so I think that federal agencies are cooperating. And one thing I want people to remember or keep in mind is that this search of Mar-a-Lago, which is not, it's often referred to as a resort. It's really President Trump's compound. It's his formal residence in Florida, the place from which he runs his political operations, as well as some of his business operations. And so when you have a search of this facility, when you come in, obviously that has to be done in a very careful and responsible way. I's have to be dotted, T's have to be crossed. You have the FBI involved. That means that the Department of Justice at the highest levels, up to Merrick Garland, had to approve what was taking place. There had to be a clearance for this to occur. You had the Secret Service involved. Again, that has to go up to the highest levels. There has to be, that's not something somebody on the ground at the gate makes a decision about. And then you had a Department of Justice inquiry, one of several inquiries going forward, and the lawyers involved in that went to a judge or magistrate, a federal official, in the judiciary branch to get approval for a search warrant. So this is not what President Trump has tried to present it as, some sort of rogue action. This is a very formal action done, obviously, I would argue, with a great deal of care. There wasn't any trouble when the FBI agents went in. And also, it's important to understand that everybody at the Department of Justice, everybody in the Secret Service and courts, they all understand what's at stake here. You don't raid a former president's home and central political operations if you don't think that there's something very, very consequential to be found there, and if you frankly don't have a lot of advanced evidence and information to tell you that search will yield important information. So we need to, if put in that context, I think that while it's a shocking development, it's also one that I would expect went very much by the book.
So how do you see things proceeding? I'm going to ask that to you.
Well,
I'm going to ask that of you and of CK, because CK, you'll be dealing with some of this on your show today. I mean, because this is a obviously developing story.
Yes. And I think that CK's observations are incredibly important, because CK has not just a brilliant, legal mind, but also somebody who's got real on the ground experience of looking at these issues, dealing with them, comes into play in all sorts of ways. So what I will tell you is that there's a political layout that's going to be very, very significant, because like it or not, Donald Trump's base is going to be at its highest level of agitation. I mean, there is simply no question that that this search has rallied his base probably at a level unprecedented in his presidency, at least since January 6th. And that is going to have an effect on even primaries today. I think it could have some influence. I think it will have a great deal of significance as regards the November election. And frankly, Democrats have to be conscious of. Donald Trump supporters will turn out, and they will be very agitated. Their agitation will certainly play out at the polls. It could also play out in many, many other ways. So we are, as a country, in a more tense and more difficult position today than we were yesterday, for lack of a better way of saying it.
So what does that mean, John?
Well, we should be conscious that people are profoundly divided about the question of lawlessness, and there are people who are determined to defend it politically, and we would hope that that would be where it would occur. But we know from the January 6th incidents that some of Donald Trump's supporters have been willing to use non-political or non-electoral means to try and upend processes they disapprove of.
And for those of you who are listening, Serena Williams just announced her retirement. Bless her heart.
Well, that's a big deal, too.
Look, the hits keep on coming.
Yeah.
The hits.
Well, you lost you got a long list of things. And David McCullough, the great historian.
Yes. Oh, boy.
So,
well, it's what'd you say, that just the hits keep on coming every day. They keep on coming. But CK, your thoughts? I mean, because you'll be talking about because this is a developing story, but there's a lot for you to be dealing with today.
Absolutely, Santita. I think that the process has got to continue. The one thing I think that people must realize is how that this was a process. It was meticulously executed. I talked about this earlier, the fact that all of the documentation, all the appropriate paperwork to execute on a warrant of this magnitude. They didn't just jump in there without notice, without crossing every T, without dotting every I. If they were able to break into his safe, they had probable cause, they had a warrant that allowed them to do that. There was nothing loosey-goosey about this raid. You can call it a raid, or you can just call it the execution of, a warrant. They were there legitimately, and there was probably a lot of cooperation, a lot of opposition leading up to this point. So I don't think there was a question of surprise. The surprise maybe was the magnitude of it. That may have been the surprise. But, if you're going to raid someone's house, a raid is a raid is a raid. They may not have known exactly the time, the date, but they knew that it was going to happen because someone would have had the opportunity because it was a judge that had to sign off on this. And I believe the judge was a Trump appointee. So I think that there are a lot of dynamics to this. And this is the first, I believe, of many. I don't think it's going to stop here if we look at what's going to happen in the future. Putting aside the political fallout, which I think is going to be quite significant. But I think we have to be careful. There's going to be significant political fallout. There has been in terms of Trump's base uniting. But there also is political fallout in terms of Democrats and progressives uniting and saying, we've got to support this. We need greater accountability. So the Democrats need to make sure that they also are continuing to push their base during this time, especially those who believe that it's important for the president to be held accountable for his actions and his the important part that he played in the January 6th coup d'etat. There are many people that believe he needs to be held accountable. Now, again, I'm not persuaded right now, Santita, that an indictment will ensue just because I don't see that yet. Is there sufficient evidence for an indictment? I believe actually there is. If we combine what we're seeing from January 6th, which, by the way, was the foundation, I believe the January 6th committee presented a nice gift with a bow, a very pretty bow, to the Justice Department as anticipated, because the Justice Department has the ability to execute. The January 6th committee didn't have the ability to execute, to take it further, but the Justice Department, the FBI, did have that ability, but they needed to have the evidence. So what now they're doing is really connecting the dots. And I believe the dots are connected, will continue to be connected straight up to President Trump. So I believe there will be sufficient evidence for an indictment, but whether there will be an indictment or indictments leading up to the president and including President Trump, that's going to be a separate question. I think politics will intervene in that, whereas politics truly really shouldn't intervene, because this is a question of law. This is a question of justice. But we are dealing in a political environment, so many will weigh in, I believe, in the ultimate determination. But it is not looking good for President Trump. As it relates to the FBI, as it relates to the Justice Department, it's also not looking good for President Trump in New York State. It's also not looking good for President Trump in Georgia. The dots are being connected in 3 separate proceedings against President Trump. Very significant dots. You've got Georgia, the breadbasket of the South, that has more voter suppression than a little, and where you've got very, very contentious races, where you've got the Fulton County District Attorney, Fonnie Willis, who's pushing, and is methodically putting together her case against the President of the United States, who, by the way, she got her evidence from a fellow Republican, Secretary of State. So you see, the plot does thicken here in Georgia. And the timing of it, of course, is very important. The same in the state of New York. The reason why Trump has moved his operations to Florida, Mar-a-Lago, is because there was a lot of heat in New York. 2 separate district attorney offices, if you will, or prosecutorial offices, were investigating him and his team, including his children. So there's a lot of heat and pressure in New York. This has nothing to do with the event necessarily of January 6th, although connected. The more evidence they discover, the more the dots are being connected. But the dots are connecting straight to the president. And I believe, sitting here in Georgia, what I know about our district attorney in Fulton County, Fonnie Willis, if she can connect it and make that case, she's going for broke, period, end of discussion. She will hold him accountable. I can't speak for New York. I know Letitia James is also just as vigilant and has a dynamic reputation, as do some of the other prosecutors working on the case. But I know here in Georgia, Fonnie Willis, what she appears to be doing, and she's taking her time and connecting the dots and making sure she can make whatever stick. And I don't think she will be afraid to secure an indictment. I don't think she will view it. You know, certainly you don't want to be an outlier. You want to make sure, because you've got all these cases that are in sync. And a lot of times you don't want on a state level get ahead of federal, whatever. And so when you've got the federal, the feds, or the Justice Department working on parallel action, sometimes there's some level of collaboration. But I don't think she will be afraid of the political ramifications, because the evidence appears to be so strong. And if she can connect the dots, I think she'll pull the trigger. That's my sense of what will happen in the future. But from the political standpoint, we are growing dangerously close to what some might perceive a political or actual civil war, because our country is so divided. And that's the difficulty and the tragedy of what I see, Santita. I'm fearful of that. You know, I have children in school. I have a son who's in college in Kansas, you know, and while I applauded Kansas' position as it related to women's reproductive rights. That was a surprise to me. I applauded that because my son is the one who brought to my attention that the reversal of Roe versus Wade, and I mean, I knew this viscerally, but he actually articulated it, didn't just set women back, didn't just impact women. It also impacted young men like him in college. Now, I didn't want to go into, the discussions of what people do in college, but I went to college, so I know what people do. Yep. But I was certainly felt very good about what Kansas did. But Kansas is one state. And of course, many states are trying to emulate or hoping to be able to take a page out of Kansas's playbook. But there are even more states that are really enforcing Roe versus Wade, the reversal of Roe versus Wade, and going further and criminalizing a woman's right to choose what happens to her body, and criminalizing the men who could be involved in helping a woman choosing what she has to do, or anyone in the process, her family, her pastor, her doctor, her minister, anyone involved in the process in some states can be facing criminal penalties. So we're living in very treacherous times, and we are a divided country. And the events surrounding January 6th are proof positive of that. And so further actions relative to the president will continue to divide the country. But quite frankly, I don't think there's a choice. I don't think the Justice Department has a choice. There's got to be some level of accountability, because these are massive, potentially massive actions of treason. This is not just a little, little aberration, small violation. These potentially are massive actions of treason. People are going to jail surrounding the events of January 6th. The only question is, will those people who were part of the planning and meticulous execution and inciting be held as accountable as those who actually pulled the trigger, who were there protesting, marching, and beating and ultimately killing people on January 6th? That's the only question. How far will it go?
Well, how far will it go, John Nichols? Where are we going? Because some people, when you say civil war, they say, oh, it's not that bad. I think we're going too far. I'm like, my mother, John Nichols, was driving, my parents have a home in Washington, and we're still trying to settle out our grandmother's, affairs in Virginia and South Carolina. They passed away in 2015 and 2017. That having been said, my mother was driving from Washington, D.C. through Virginia, through North Carolina into South Carolina, and she said, if anyone thinks that President Trump doesn't have strength, they are blind, deaf, and they are very dumb. And she meant that as in stupid. She said, I have seen signs as big as billboards with his name on them as I'm driving through these states. I mean, John, we have a very divided nation right now. Is there anything we can do to
sure, there's a lot we can do.
Heal the breach?
The fact is, we're not. Well, yeah, there's a lot we can do. The fact is, we're not as divided as we sometimes think. Mm-hmm. The reality is, of course, that polling suggests that an overwhelming majority of Americans think that Donald Trump should be held to account. It's also important to know that Donald Trump lost the last presidential election by 7 million votes. And in fact, that an overwhelming, a clear majority of Americans didn't want him in office. So the divisions need to be put in perspective. There are many sides in a struggle like this, but if you imagine two main sides, the side that favors the rule of law and favors justice is larger, and that should be understood, because that becomes relevant in a political context. The elections in November matter immensely if they deliver a clear signal of support for the folks in Democrats in Congress and in the states. That's going to be a big deal. That election in Georgia that CK was just talking about is a huge deal. The elections in Wisconsin and in Michigan and in Pennsylvania and in Arizona, perhaps most of all, these matter, and they have the potential to send a very, very powerful signal. Remember, in 1974, when Nixon stepped down, you had elections that fall. Those elections sent a very clear signal with overwhelming Democratic victories that people were glad Nixon had stood down, and frankly, that they were going to hold to account those Republicans who had tried to defend Nixon. So that can happen in politics. So that's a very big deal, and it's very, very important. There's one final thing I'll say on this discussion of civil war. Too often we look backward in our calculations to try and understand things. And if somebody writes about history, I sure understand. But it's also important to look with a bit of care at where we take our examples from and where the evidence takes us. And the danger in this moment is that we might find a circumstance where instead of a physical fight of some kind like that you see essentially a slow-moving coup take charge. And the way that would play out, and it's not a secret, would be for Republicans to take control of the House and the Senate and governorships in key states this fall, have a strong fall for Republicans, to have those Republicans use their positions to clear the way for Donald Trump's 2024 presidential run, to put the pieces in place, the voter suppression, election restructuring, a host of other measures and actions, so that there would be that possibility that Donald Trump would indeed be president of the United States again in 2024. Not someone who's under indictment, not someone who's going to jail, as some are suggesting, but actually somebody who's going to the Oval Office. If that happens, Steve Bannon and others have made it very, very clear that Trump intends to restructure the federal government so that it is in his service. And that includes the removal of thousands of people from positions at the Department of Justice. They now are talking about scrapping the FBI, restructuring all of the security services, etc. And that's not a civil war. That is a coup. And it is something that I think we saw attempts to play out on January 6th. It's something we should worry about in January of 2025. Our vote will decide, at least to some extent, whether that becomes possible.
It's going to determine so much. I mean, people, we can't be ahistorical here. They have had in our history physical fights on the floor of Congress.
Yep.
And I can see that happening now. Because when my brother Jesse was there, and I guess he left a decade ago, he had a confrontation in the congressional cloakroom. CK, I don't know if you're still there. It was not pretty, because this guy thought he was going to roll up on Jesse, and that was not going to happen. And he had some choice words for him. He said, "Now, if you want to, let's say, talk smack, you better be able to back it up, because I am a man from the South Side, and I have all that comes with that, and I will let you know it. If you want this butt whipping today, you can have it. I will give it to you right here, right now." People were like, oh my gosh. He said, no, you can't. You don't play with people. That's why, that's one of the dangers of social media, John, because people say whatever they want to say. They're so incendiary. And I'm like, wait a minute. Are you nuts? You can't talk to somebody that way. I mean, and not only not draw offense, but provoke a physical confrontation. And people are doing so much of that today. And I just see it and I feel it, because people were gathered outside of Mar-a-Lago yesterday. And you know what? That's just the beginning of it. I'm not saying that should govern whether you deal with someone who's committed a grave malfeasance or not. No. But I'm saying you got to understand. That's why I said, Trump supporters, call in. I don't have a problem with you. Just talk about it. You don't know what I think. You haven't asked me. You've asked me nothing. What you have never heard me do on this show is call him out of his name or disrespect him personally. No, I've not done that. That's not been my MO. I've told you the President Trump that I met years ago is not, in terms of policy, there's no match. I've said that. Many people have known him for a lot of years. So, really calm down. And please come to me from a place of knowledge, not ignorance. because you don't know anything until you ask. You don't know who I know, who I've met, and all of that. So there's that. This platform is for you. As long as you are respectful, you can say what you will. But you must be respectful. I'm not going to have people throwing up all over this platform, not while I'm the steward of it. I'm not going to have it. Not going to have it. We gotta grow up in our politics, everybody. You know, we are all occupying the same land space. We have got to make America work for everybody. Either it works for everyone or it works for no one. That's it. So I love you all. John, what else do you want us to know? Because we just had this infrastructure, the inflation bill, but they won't deal with they will not have a real discussion with Big Pharma about their control and the insurance industry's control over our medications, how much we get, how much we pay for it. And your book, Coronavirus Criminals and Pandemic Profiteers, really goes to the heart of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Look, without going into a great deal of detail, because I know we're pretty much out of time, and it's a good thing for all of us to get on activities today. I will tell you that we've had this profound conversation in the last hour about the rule of law and about democracy itself, about coup attempts and huge issues, and we have to have that perspective. By the same token, we must understand that we're living in a country that has just been through a pandemic that is not over. People are getting sick. People are still dying. And there are still big companies that are profiting massively off efforts to manage and address that pandemic. There's very little inquiry, very little investigation into their profiteering, their wrongdoing. And so that's something that we, at our best, will keep in perspective and try and recognize that even as we face all these threats to democracy, we also have to maintain some control over corporate power and frankly, over those who have so much authority over our economic and political lives. Again, the elections in November become hugely important in this regard. And I'll circle around to say, as we began, that this is election day in my home state of Wisconsin. Ron Johnson has been a pure ally of Donald Trump, who has supported conspiracy theories that have been incredibly harmful to a great mass of people. He is now going to face the challenge, almost certainly, from Mandela Barnes, who is a remarkable young political leader. It's going to be an ugly fight. I think that there will be crude and vicious attacks on Mandela Barnes. And I guess the thing I would ask people to do is to probably rise above the petty politics of TV ads and, go and pay attention to this race this fall. Get a chance to meet Mandela, get a chance to hear him speak. My sense is that knowing him for many years, people who meet him tend to have great confidence in him and be excited about supporting him. And so rather than tell people what to do, I would simply suggest that take the time in this state and frankly in other states around the country to engage at a deeper level in politics, meet these candidates personally, listen to them personally. Don't just let negative ads on TV define the range of what is possible in our politics.
Amen to that. Amen to that. And please get out and vote today. Please, please, please. These votes, as you can see, are of tremendous consequence. You matter. You matter. You matter. The Congress, well, Democrats have been gerrymandered out of their fair share of seats, but Congress, both houses, it's one vote in one house and a dozen or so in the other house. Really, your vote really does matter. And oh my goodness, what will happen in November? You need to get everybody registered to vote. Please do that. CK, you're going to be talking about this and so many other things on WAOK today?
I certainly will, Santita. Today's a big news day. It's dominated by, and of course, the rating of Donald Trump's home. But here in Georgia, we have a lot going on. We have to keep our eye on the prize because it's unconscionable for many that Senator Raphael Warnock could be even in a competitive race against Herschel Walker. Herschel Walker may be a lot of things, but he is not who many people, including myself, feel should be leading the state of Georgia as a senator. Now, he might be a lot of things. There might be a lot of wonderful things about him, but he, in my humble impression, should not be leading the state of Georgia as a senator. And we have one of the most able senators that I believe the U.S. Senate has seen in a long time. I mean, no disrespect to anyone else, and Raphael Warnock has served this state well. So we have our eye on that election. We have our eye on the gubernatorial election where Stacey Abrams is running, and she's running neck and neck. We also are looking at, because whatever happens in Florida, a lot of times happens in Georgia and vice versa. So we're looking at the race with Val Dennis. She's running neck and neck, too. There are a lot of important races that periodically we discuss because our listeners want to know, what do they need to do? We're in a voter suppression state. Georgia is a voter suppression state. And so our listeners want to know what's going on. What's the connection between the January 6th events on January 6th? What's the connection with the raid of President Trump's home or business office or Mar-a-Lago? What connection? How do we connect the dots? People like to hear dots connected, especially in an election season. So we're going to be discussing all that on my show at 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on WAOK. And we hope that some of your listeners will tune in. And I will also have some of our listeners tune in, Santita, to your magnificent show every single day. Because, again, we want people to be informed so they can make informed decisions. We're not telling them how to vote, what to do. We want them to make informed decisions. And if they need tools of survival in this very, very difficult election season, we want to give them the tools to survive. Our listeners in Florida, we have a lot of listeners in Florida on my show, and they want to know, what do they do in Florida? Because Florida is also a voter suppressive state. So Alabama is that way. Tennessee, South Carolina. I'm surrounded. The irony of the South is we're surrounded by voter suppression, and it's getting worse. And let's not even mention the impact on the women's reproductive rights, where it is illegal in most of these states for women to choose to terminate her pregnancy. And it's becoming illegal in some of these states to use certain forms of contraception. It's becoming illegal to have children via in vitro fertilization in some of these states. So we have to really keep our eye on the prize and make sure that our voters understand and make sure that they're asking the questions of the politicians running for office, where they stand on these issues, so they can make informed decisions. That's what we want. So thank you. We got a lot on our plate today.
And I know you'll get it done. Everybody, please check out John Nichols at Nichols Uprising. That's right. I love it. I love it. And get the book, Coronavirus Criminals and Pandemic Profiteers. It is a fantastic book. And it's a book for our times, and it helps you to understand just how important it is, how important your vote is. For those of you who've asked, I put it up here, but let me just say it. At 12 noon today, Daryl Jones, attorney Barbara Arnwine will be on WOL. I know you all want to hear CK. She'll be up in just about an hour. 10 o'clock Chicago time, 11 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on WAOK. WAOK, everybody. Go on and check her out today. I love you, everybody. John Nichols, I love you, my dear brother beloved. I love you, my dear sister beloved. Have a great show, CK, on WAOK at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 a.m. Central Standard Time. She's going to be talking about a lot. You don't want to miss it. So just go on and hop on over there and be with her today. Love you, everybody. Love you, love you, love you. God bless you. Thank you, Coach May, for a great show. All right, everybody. I am out.